Okie dokie. So if you want to check out the lesson prompt in Slack, we're just going to pick up where we left off on the Rails API routes and controllers. And we're pretty much down at the bottom. I'll send you guys the exact portion of the lesson where we're going to start if you want to click on that. But quick thumbs up. Did everyone complete the 5 methods? So right before the break, we were trying to finish up delete. So did everyone get delete working? Because we wanted to get that finished before lunch. Okay, so I'm going to move forward with that assumption that you guys did get that working. I have pushed up my version of the code from right before lunch in case anyone needs something for reference. But let's move forward. Let's knock this last one out and get you guys to some lab time. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll get started. So this one's a little tricky because we're dealing with both artists and songs, but you guys can totally handle this for sure. So here's what we're going to do. We want to create a method in our artist controller that will create a new song and go ahead and attach it to an artist. Now, generally, depending on, it's kind of your preference, but maybe you would want to create a separate songs controller to manage all of your song logic and CRUD actions. That's totally fine, but kind of for simplicity's sake, and since we're only building one song method, we're going to add it to the artist. We're just going to add this method inside of our artist controller. We're not going to worry about creating a separate songs controller right now. So let's walk through that. The first thing we want to do is we want to create a special route for this method that we're going to build. So this morning we did a resources artist. We put that command inside of our routes.rb file. And so that went ahead and scaffolded out 5 RESTful conventional API methods. The method we're going to build now is kind of a custom method, a custom route and a custom method. So we're going to build this one by hand. So if you guys want to go to your routes.rb file, and we'll build this one right underneath that resources artist line. So as we talked about this morning, all of the routes in Rails, they consist of the HTTP verb, the URL or the path that you'll hit in the browser or for the API. And then we also specify the controller and the specific method inside of that controller that should correspond to the route that we're creating. So what we're going to do here, this is going to be a post HTTP verb because we're going to be creating a song essentially. And the path that we're going to use for this is going to be kind of nested inside of our artists. So the way that we're going to be able to create a song in this setup for this application is we're only going to be able to create a song through an artist itself, so that the songs are automatically associated with a given artist. And so what this is going to look like is we'll go to artist / the ID of that artist, and then we're going to put a songs path after that. So this is kind of the convention that we're going to use to kind of nest songs relationally inside, or relate the songs directly to the artist. We're going to use this to method, which is another kind of Rails helper. And it's just kind of a shortcut for which controller in action do you want me to go to after I receive a post request to this URL. So again, Ruby reads very much like English. So a post request to that URL is going to route us to the artist controller. And then #, we're going to call this new custom method, we'll call it new song. And we need to put that inside of string, double quotes or ticks, whatever you want to use. So go ahead and save that, and then let's just confirm the route that will create for us. So if you remember from this morning, we can go back to the command line, and we can do Rails routes. Just to sanity check the routes we have available now. And so and I need to restart my server. So we'll try that one more time. So be sure to start and stop your server. And let's rake those routes, or grab those routes one more time. And there it is right there. I may have missed it earlier. But we now have this extra route, this custom route, this post route to artists /ID/songs. And that's going to hit our artists controller. And then we're going to create a custom method called new_song. And then if you recall, the rest of these routes, these are the 5/6 API routes that Rails created for us automatically under the hood when we used that resources artist command in our routes file. Rails creates, it kind of gives us access to both a patch and a put for update. So we could use either one of those if we wanted. I usually just go with patch. I guess if you really want to get semantic, I think of patch as if I'm like, you patch up a boat, like an inflatable raft or inflatable boat or something. If you get a hole in the boat, you don't replace the entire boat, you just kind of patch up a part of the boat. So when I think of a patch, if I'm trying to update a record, I think of a patch as if I'm just updating like 1 or 2 fields on that record. Like if I get a new phone number and I want to update the phone number in my profile or update my email, it's just like a really small update that I want to do on an object, compared to put, which it's really just semantics, but a put I like to think of is if I'm replacing the entire object for some reason. So put would be kind of a much more robust update of a record. And I think a patch is just like 1 field or something. That being said, you can use either one in Postman or in your $HTTP calls in Angular, and they'll work. They'll both work fine. Okay, so we created the route. Now let's go into our artist controller and create that custom method of new song. I'm just going to put this down below destroy and kind of above the private section here. So go ahead and kind of create the wrapper for our new show method. And again, we're going to add that active active record query code that we experimented with yesterday to create a new song and add it directly to an artist. And so if you want to take a look there in the screenshot, so the first thing we want to do is we want to query for the artists that we want to add a new song to their songs relationship. So again, we've used this line of code. I guess this is the 4th time we've used it in this file. But we'll find our artists using the artist ID params that come in through the request object. Then on the next line, if you guys recall from yesterday, kind of the end of the day, we can create a new song directly through that artist relationship. And the way that we can do that is we're going to grab that artist, and then we're going to add a new song to the songs table that's going to relate to that artist. So this is some active record magic right here. Kind of a songs method that refers to the songs table. And it's going to attach it directly to the artist. And then let's use create here. And inside of create, I'm just going to pass in title of params title. Let me fix that. So the idea is that you'll create a form that, just for simplicity's sake, you'll just add the title of the song. And then that's going to be sent to our Rails API server in the params hash under the name of title, or the key of title. So that's what this is going to be. So when we write to the database, the title field for this song is going to be whatever we put into the form, let's say, for the title field. And then we're going to return 2 things. So this is a little bit more robust of a JSON object that we're going to send back. And this is just how I decided to set it up. So what I want to do is, after I create a new song, I want to send back the artist information And I also want to send back the artist's array of songs. So what I'm going to do here is after I save that song, if you recall from yesterday, artist.songs will return all of the given songs for an artist. It's much more, much simpler than Mongoose and dealing with callbacks and promises and stuff. And so down here, I'm actually going to render a little bit more of a complex JSON object. So I'm going to send back a JSON object that contains the artist object and the songs object. So I'm going to make, and this should be pretty similar to our express routes, how we send back data. You know, we can specify the data object that we send with the response object. So let's make artist equal the artist variable that we defined up here on line 44, or my line 44. And also, let's just go ahead and send back that songs. So now my request or my response object will have an artist key and a songs key. And so once we get that information, we could do like an ng repeat inside of our Angular view, you know, if we want to loop over the songs or something. So this is just going to make it a little bit more flexible. So that's what the method looks like. So let's go ahead and test it out in Postman and make sure that it's working. So here's what our Postman should look like. So let's go back to Postman. Over there. Okay. So let's add a song. I'll add one for Taylor Swift. And so you can see in that screenshot, the first thing I'm going to do, I know that I'm going to send a post request. And the way that we set up our routes, if we go back to our routes.rb file, I'm going to send a post request to artist / the ID of the artist / songs. So Taylor Swift in my database is the artist with the ID of 2. So let me put a 2 there, and then songs. So that's going to be the HTTP verb in the URL I'm going to hit. And then to send that song data, let's go to the body selector, and then raw, and then make sure that this is the JSON data type. And this is pretty simple. We're only gonna, for now, we're gonna keep it simple. We're only gonna send the title of the song back to the server. And so Rails is expecting that we're sending in our params that there's gonna be a key of title. And then I'm just gonna make a welcome to New York. Classic Taylor Swift, okay. So let's make sure this is working. Let's send that away. Action controller, oh, I may need to restart my server. That is my bad. And I'm just gonna check my Rails server logs to confirm. Let's see if there's anything nefarious that's blowing up. Action not found. The action new song could not be found for artist controller. So I need to restart my server, and I think we'll be fine. So it'll reload my Rails environment with the new method that we created. And let me try that again. I'll send it away. Action controller exception caught. So let's go back here. Let's see what kind of errors we're getting.
I think it was
Did I misspell it?
Yeah, you misspelled the name. You called it new show instead of new song or something like that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for keeping me honest there.
No, I had the same
so
error.
Goofy.
So I looked at it.
My bad. Yeah, the screenshot I gave you is new song. My bad. I brain farted once again. So make sure it says new _ song. I'm going to restart my server just to be safe. And let's try this 3rd time's a charm. So if we send it away, there we go. So now our artist object is a little more complex because the JSON that we're sending back, we're sending the information for the artist, and then we're also sending all the songs that belong to that artist. So here in the JSON response, here's my artist object with Taylor Swift. And then here's my songs key, which will contain an array of the songs that belong to her. And right now I just have that one song, but I could totally create another one. So if I did style, for example, let me send that one away. And so now down here, I have 2 songs in the songs array. And so that's how we're gonna do it. And so now when you go to like the show page for an artist to see the details, you'll have this songs array that you can totally do an ng repeat or whatever you wanna do to iterate through that array. And then let me put one more screenshot. Another way just to test this out to make sure that it was working is we could also just go into Rails console just to confirm this. So this is kind of just a bonus, but if you want to check it out, going directly down into the metal, let me go into my Rails console. And I'm going to find the artist with the ID of 2, just to confirm all this stuff. So your artist, whichever artist that you used, the ID is probably a little different. So find me the artist with the ID of 2, and that's Taylor. And then let me find her songs. So I'll hit the up arrow to find the artist. I could assign this to a variable as well. I'm just being lazy. So find me all the songs that belong to the artist with the ID of 2. And there we go. So pretty much what we did yesterday. I have the song Welcome to New York, and I also have the song style. And I didn't send genre or, well, I guess that's the only other field that we had for song. But yeah, if you wanted to send genre, you can totally do that as well. So yeah.
I have a question. So I see it on the terminal, but in my Postman, I don't see it. Could I show you?
Sure. Yeah, go for it. Let me stop my share. Okay.
Let me share. Oh, that's the wrong one. This one. Okay, so here I added the Welcome to New York twice on accident, and then I added like a random one here.
Okay.
But when I do a get request to that artist on Postman, where am I supposed to know that it has songs?
Yeah, so you should just see it in the response. So there's actually, we didn't create a route that will get the songs directly from the artist. You guys will create that in Angular separately. What I showed you is the response. So Alejandro, go ahead and create a new song for that artist. And remember the URL. So it goes to artist / the ID / songs. Cool. And so I think if you scroll down to the bottom, you may need to make the window larger. There you go.
See.
Yeah.
I didn't scroll. Okay.
Yeah. So that's just it's just super basic, but that's just the JSON response after we save a new song. That's what we have.
I didn't see the scroll section down here.
Yeah, Postman. There's a lot of hidden things going on in Postman.
Can I interject for a second? I think Alejandro is trying to say, like, when we were dealing in Mongo database, when we would get, like, let's say we had an embedded model, like a user has songs, we would get to like our show route, right? And we would be able to see our songs. That's what you're trying to like say, Alejandro. But when we went to our show route, the songs didn't appear. And I think that's just the way SQL is formatted. Like if you went in your show route and you made another variable that was like songs equals artist.find params.id.songs, then you would be able to see it. But it's just the difference between the databases and how we function. That's why it doesn't appear the way you would expect it to be.
Yeah, we can. We just didn't write the code to grab all the songs with our show route, but we can totally do that. It'll take us like 30 seconds. Yeah, Kieran, let me share my screen really quick. And to Cody and Alejandra's point, right now our artist show route just brings back the artist data. But if we also wanted to grab the song data all at once, we can totally do that. So let's write some code really quick. And it's pretty much going to be the same code that we just put in that new song. So right now our show method, it's only returning the artist, right? So if I wanted to return, let's do a get request to Taylor Swift again. So it's only returning the artist info, right? But now that we're adding songs, I want to see both the artist and the songs in one fell swoop. So really the quickest way we could do that is pretty much the same code that we just added down here. So when we grab the artist, let's go ahead and grab all the songs for that artist. And then let's send back that artist, let's create a JSON object that contains the artist data and the songs array data. So essentially, I hate to copy code, but just to show you guys, if you want to copy these two lines, that should be enough to kind of update our method up here in the show. So what we could do here in our show method, so we're still going to find the artist. And then while we're there, let's go ahead and grab all the songs that belong to that artist. And then let's send a JSON object of the artist information and the songs information. So let's just make sure that works. I will restart my server. Cool. And so now if I do another GET request to Taylor Swift, so now when I go to the show page, a show request for an artist, now I'm getting the artist and the song array. So if you wanted to add that, that's totally cool. Yeah, pretty easy. Well, easy-esque, but again, it's a lot less code than with Mongoose, in my opinion. So cool. So let's make sure that everyone is able to add a song. So if you don't mind putting a thumbs up in Slack, and then let's address everyone's issue, and then we'll be ready for lab time. We'll add a front end on top of this. So let me address these Slack questions all at once. Kieran, can I see your code again? Mine is all breaking again. Okay, let me paste in my new song method so you guys have it for reference. So that's my new song method. What other questions? So Alejandra, artist, songs, songs. Yeah, so that looks right, Alejandra, if you want to render the JSON, and then that would be the object. Yeah, Cody's super close on that show. The only thing we need to do, well, yeah, so you could do artist.songs directly. I just assigned it to a variable. Cody just saved us a line of code there. Let me paste in my show.
That's a question that I have.
Mm-hmm.
So the variable, saving it to a variable thing. So
yeah,
if we're saving it to a variable, but it's only in that instance, then when does a variable actually become useful? Because if it's only good in that instance, does saving it for a variable become more code than less?
Well, it's kind of a preference. I mean, sometimes I like breaking stuff out. I mean, you can be super clever, and you could probably do that entire method with one line of code. I think Colin alluded to it too. Like, I think sometimes you can be like too cute by half, you know? Just because you can do something on one line doesn't mean you should. So that's just my preference. I mean, what Cody did is, and that's actually much more succinct. It's not that big a deal. Totally a preference. But as far as a variable, if I wanted to do something else with that song's information before I send it back, then it makes sense for me to assign it to a variable because I'm going to do some more stuff to it. In this example, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, that's exactly what I'm asking about.
So why would we assign something to a variable?
So no, you were saying that you're using it for more stuff. So that's what I was confused about, because that's the part that's one of the things that were tripping me up. So that's what I was asking about.
So in this example, I am not doing anything else with that song's variable. I'm just assigning it to a variable and then passing it into my JSON response object. What I'm saying is, if I were to do more stuff to the artist.songs array, then maybe it makes sense to assign it to a variable. So I can, maybe I want to change some more methods onto it or something. In this example, what Cody put is totally fine. I didn't have to assign it to a variable. It'll work either way. I just prefer putting stuff line by line. And sometimes I think it makes it easier for you guys to kind of break stuff down. It's really a preference. But remember like in the meme stack world, remember we would chain promises together. We would return stuff, pass it into other, chained .thens and such. So a lot of times in that world, you do need to assign stuff to a variable so you can like kind of pass it down the pipe. In this example, that's just how I set it up. You don't have to do that if you don't want to.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the example specifically. I just mean in general. So specifically going back to what you were mentioning before with the promises and passing it down the line. That's the part that I'm getting confused about. So I'm saying I understand that there's a preference on how to type it. But what I'm wondering is, from my understanding, is that if I'm putting it to a variable, can I use, it's only in that instance that I can use it. I can't use it outside of the definition. So I think you pretty much explained what you were just saying. And then this is what I was just trying to clarify, is that it's mostly meant, so if you want to be able to like expand further and be able to do other things within that part, it's already set up for you to do so.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but technically you could make that a global variable and other methods could have access to it. We're not going to do that here. We want to try to stay away from global variables, but technically I could make that song's variable available to any other definition in my artist controller if I wanted to. That's not the best way to set up your code, but technically I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just I'm still trying to grapple when there's instant versus instances, and when we're doing different things for what reason. And so for me personally, I just wanted the clarification so that I can understand it a little bit more straightforward, the different choices that are being made, so that I can understand it and be able to do so as well.
Yeah,
sure.
I think in this, Audrey, like just listening in, I think in Rails and the way we're building Rails right now, you are probably pretty unlikely to use instance variables, just in general. You're probably, like, if you were to expand this method, you would define another method in the controller, same way you would in Express, and you just pass it as an argument, right? And you just pass the variable as an argument and, deal with the methods and the return values in the same way you did in JavaScript. So I think one thing to just keep in mind is I think in terms of how you treat the controller and what you do in it and how you pass content around, there shouldn't be a big difference between what we're doing in Rails and what we did in JavaScript, apart from just the language. Within Rails, and if you do server-side rendering, I think Mark might have mentioned this earlier, that you use instance variables like that @ variable to pass data to a view if you have a server-side rendered application. But we're not doing that. So just having like local instance variables for this, I think is totally fine.
Yeah, like I said, I think I'm just confused about the differences when I'm hearing them, and I get tripped up on it so much when trying to like do it on my own. So I'm always having a problem just remembering when we're talking about instance versus instances, and because it's such a big stickler on that was Ruby about this, about when you're using which one over which. It's just like I was just hoping to get just a little bit more clarification so that it wouldn't be such a roadblock for me moving forward.
Yeah, I think your general rule of thumb moving forward should be default to local variables, and yeah, I think that should be your default going forward. I think it's unlikely you're going to use instance variables too often.
Yeah, and just to like reiterate something that Colin mentioned. So if we were using Rails views, we would be using that @ symbol for any variable containing information that we wanted to render in the view. And actually for this code, you could use instance variables. You could just throw an @ in front of everything that we've coded and it would work just fine. But like Colin mentioned, since we're not using the Vue Rails View engine, we just want to keep these variables local, so we're not putting that at symbol in front of them. We're not making them instance variables by the strict Rails definition, the Ruby definition rather.
Kieran, do you want to share your screen?
Yeah. And I'm going to put a prompt, if you guys don't mind giving me a thumbs up.
So it seems like you're using a get on your postman when that route is strictly a post route, because where you want to post a song into an artist.
Still broke.
What
I
is
started out with a post one. I've been trying lots of different things.
Sure, let's see what's in your body. So in Postman, let's look at body. Cool, so that looks right. Let's go to your route, the new song route in your Atom.
Let's see, show.
All right.
Paste it, so it should be right.
Yeah, Kieran, let's check your Rails server. Let's see what the error is. Go to the terminal and scroll up a little bit. The blue, yeah. So let's see. Uninitialized constant artist controller. Okay, so go back to artist controller. So it should be artists controller. Remember, controllers are plural. So go up to the very top of that file. So it does say artists controller. Does it give us a line number anywhere?
Can you go to your route.rb?
Oh yeah, probably, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, so Kieran, on line 4, the 2 : that should be artists. Yeah, good catch.
Son of a.
Okay, so save that and restart your server, and then I think you'll be good.
Hit send.
Yeah, go back to Postman and hit send.
Oh, that looks good.
Cool. There you go. So that should be 7 thumbs ups. Is anyone else having any bugs, any errors we need to address? Whoa, so the thumbs up just went down 1 or 2. Okay. All right. Okay, cool. All 8. Awesome, guys. So that so we have a pretty we have 6 methods in our Rails API, and that is going to be plenty to move on to lab time. So yesterday we worked on the model, we worked on the data. Today we worked on the controller portion. Now for lab, let's work on the V in MVC. Let's build an Angular front end that will consume this. So Cody, if you don't mind creating some breakouts, and then I'll walk us through what we're going to do for the rest of the afternoon. So here's the prompt for lab time this afternoon. And I'll be adding more code to this as we check in throughout the afternoon. But if you guys want to check out this prompt, and we'll get you guys started. Kieran Mountain, Audrey Rails, Kat Martinez, Dr. Watson, Sophie, Knife Lady. Alejandra, you got a clever name too, huh? Just spelled a little differently. Cool. So if you want to click on that, let's walk through what we're going to be doing this afternoon. And I'll share my screen here in a moment. But for lab time, what we're going to do is essentially create an Angular Node Express Angular front end that will consume these endpoints that we created with our Rails API. And just as a reminder, here's what kind of a finished version of this app could look like. We're not going to get through all of the front-end styling today. If you guys for homework this weekend will continue working on this app to get some practice. But this is just one example of kind of the finished features of what we're going to go for today. So if you want to click on that Heroku app, so we're essentially able to do full CRUD on an artist, and then we're able to create new songs and add those songs to the artists that are in our database. So that's kind of the idea. I'll show you here in a minute. I will show you kind of as what it should look like kind of by the end of the day today, kind of what we should be shooting for. But here are the prompts to get you guys started initially. I'll give you guys maybe 30 minutes, maybe about 30 minutes to work on this, and then we'll come back and then I'll start building it as well and answer any questions that you guys have. But I want you guys to set up your Angular app. So you guys should be all pros at setting up Angular at this point. So for part one, these are just some prompts on how to get started. I didn't go into explicit detail. I put some, let me paste these as well. I put 2 links to 2 previous lessons that you may want to use for reference. The Intro to Angular lesson, just to spin up an Angular Node Express app, and then Colin's UI router lesson. So I want you guys just to add like 1 or 2 states using UI router for practice. But these prompts, if you look at part 1, I want you guys to spin up a new Angular app. The name of the app should be Muse app. The controller, so we'll just have one Angular controller. Name that Muse controller. And these names are just when I go through the code later, this is the code that I use, the naming conventions. So just so we're all consistent. That controller should have a function called getArtists. It should be very similar to how you guys managed your stuff in Project 3. And the getArtist function should hit the Rails API endpoint, localhost 3000/artists. So we've already tested that endpoint out in Postman, so we know what that data should look like. And so now I want you guys to hit that via your Angular controller using $HTTP. Then create an index.html. And just for this part 1, I want you guys to take a stab. Just see if you can console log that JSON data in the browser. If you have time, if you really knock that out of the park, you can go ahead and start working on maybe building like an ng repeat, kind of fleshing out your views. But for now, I just want you guys to get to a point where you can at least console log the data before we reconvene. I'll talk about part 2 here in a second. But here's what your folder structure should look like, just to kind of give you an idea. Who's jamming?
Whoops.
Cody, rocking it, man.
Someone unmuted me.
So this is what your folder structure should look like. Just wanted to give you guys a little bit of help in that regard. So obviously you don't have to worry about the database because we're using Rails API for the database. And then kind of where I would like to see you guys take a stab at when we reconvene in about 30 minutes is mainly the console part. Don't worry about the view so much. If you can like work on the view, that's great. But just see if you can console log that JSON that we're sending back with the response object. If you look in the console of that screenshot, if you can get that working, then that's going to be perfect. And then we'll reconvene and move forward from there. But this is kind of, this main like 30 minutes. I just want you guys to get a little bit more practice with building an Angular app from scratch, given the lesson reference, and just getting that one GET request from Angular to the Rails API on localhost 3000 to grab all of the artists. And then we'll move forward from there. I'm going to share my screen and kind of show you a little bit more detail of how this should be set up. So obviously we're dealing with 2 different apps. So you want to have your Rails app running in some terminal window, and then you'll want to have your NodeMon server running in a separate window. And so I'm going to share my screen and walk you guys through that really quickly. So here's my Rails server right here. It's running on localhost 3000. And over here, this is my Muse app. This is running on localhost 4000. So this is about as far as I expect we'll get today. It's not perfectly styled out. You guys can work on that this weekend if you want. But it has a little bit of a UI sref for the UI router. So we just have two routes, just an artist route and then creating a new artist. And here's a form. So if I wanted to create a new artist, crap, now I gotta look up an image. I'm just gonna grab one of these images here. Go with Taylor Swift's image. So you can paste the image here in this form. Then we need add an artist. Bono is added to the bottom with Taylor Swift's image. You can also click on like the show page, and you'll want to be able to loop over the songs for a given artist with ng repeat. And then you can update and also delete artists as well. So when I delete, there's no page refresh, right? Because we're using Angular. And then you can also update an artist. So Mullet Magoo, if I save that, and then U2 has been updated to Mullet Magoo. So it's just those basic CRUD methods, but this is an Angular app, Angular Node Express app. So this is on localhost 4000. And then I have my localhost 3000 working in the background here. So if I refresh this, so here's where I just updated U2 to Mullet Magoo, for example. Then I just deleted a couple of artists, so I only have 4 right now. But hopefully we can get through this by the end of the day. This is some good stuff here. But let me stop my screen share and just see if you guys have any questions. So the idea is let's go into breakouts for about 30 minutes and just see how far you can get just spinning up a basic Angular app. Just see if you can at least grab that JSON data and console log it in the browser. That's a good first step. Any questions before we move forward into breakouts?
I have a question. So we'll be creating this Angular app probably on our local computer. Can we do it in the MIDI folder?
Yeah, do this locally. Do all of this stuff locally because I don't know if we'll have time today, but we can do it next week. We'll walk you guys through deployment of the Rails app. So remember, if we want to deploy something to Heroku, we need to make sure that it's outside of the MIDI folder. Make sure that it's on its own version control. Yeah, so please create this app and just on your desktop or wherever you have the other one living. It'll be fine. Any other questions?
For the folder structure, I see the image that you posted there, but how does that work in relation to the folder structure that we already have?
So this is an entirely separate application. So
Right.
what I want you guys to do is create, and if you even look at the name of that folder, it says Muse Angular front end.
So that would side by side with Muse Rails backend.
Yeah, they're two entirely separate applications.
Okay.
So we already built the Rails API, and essentially, I just want you guys to build a separate Node Express Angular app, like we've done many times over the past few weeks. But the idea is that you're going to have two completely separate applications. They're completely decoupled.
Is it in the same folder, or doesn't matter at all?
Yeah, I don't put this Angular app in your Rails folder. If you're on your desktop, have a folder for the Rails API and then have a folder for this new app. So don't put them in the exact same folder, but you may want them in like the same directory.
So I'd have Muse Rails backend, Muse Angular front end.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. Yeah, just so, and again, this is why we want to get practice with this because it is a little confusing at first. Okay, I've got my front end app and I got my back end app. So whatever makes sense to you, as long as you know that they're separate. It may even be helpful, maybe have one terminal open on localhost 3, have your Rails server in one terminal. I did this last night actually when I was testing it out. have your localhost 3000 Rails server in one terminal, then have an entirely separate terminal for all of your Node Angular Express stuff. Have one Atom window with just your Rails API app. Have another Atom window with just your Node Express Angular app. So hopefully that'll kind of mentally help you to separate out the front end versus the back end. Because it can be a little tricky at first to get comfortable. But this is you guys' first stab at creating two separate applications. But if you really think about what you guys did for Project 3, you guys essentially created two separate applications. One application lived in the public folder. So your Angular app, that public folder was actually the entire front end, right? It just so happened that you dumped that public folder inside of your Node Express app. So you just had one app to serve everything. And that's okay, but consider that what if your Angular app breaks? Maybe you still want that Rails API. The cool thing about what we're doing here is that your Rails API, the data is separate from the view. So let's say that your view goes down or something, your Angular app breaks. It's relatively simple to spin up another app that's still hitting that data. And so you have like minimal downtime. But it's just a good idea to decouple the back end from the front end. And again, if you recall when we saw the Matrix project, the science fair project, if you remember the one, I'm totally spacing on her name, but remember that she had the really cool app, and then she was also working on like a Swift version or a Go version. So both of those apps, they were both front end, but they were hitting the same back end database. So that's kind of the beauty of this kind of arrangement. Yeah, so, but we want to get practice with this because this will be kind of your idea for Project 4. You'll have two separate apps. But you guys can totally do it. It's basically just building a separate Angular app instead of having it in the same thing.
Alejandro, do you have a question?
Yes, so just to clarify, when we make that HTTP call in the front end, we are making a call to localhost 3000 / either artists or / songs or whatever to grab that data to put it in the front end.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly. And I'll give you kind of a little pseudo-coded thing here.
Yeah, and to keep in mind what I meant when you set up your apps, make sure that on two different ports, your Angular app could be like, for example, on port 4000, and then your Rails app can be on port 3000 if we're setting it up that way.
Yeah.
I have two questions. One, it sounds like for this, we'd need to have two, what's it called? Rails, the thing that you control C out of, two of the Rails S running?
Terminal?
Nope, just one.
Just
Yeah.
one? And, okay. And the other question is, are we doing mkdir, or is there a Rails magic thing that, like what we did with the backend?
Let me share my screen really quickly. So let me rephrase. You guys are not touching your Rails API at all. We've done that. You guys did an excellent job. We're done with Rails for the next hour or so. Make sure that your Rails server is running on localhost 3000 and just let it run. Now what you're going to do, you're going to be able to separate Angular app. You're not dealing with Rails, so you're just like we did at Project 3, you're going to need to create a new directory because now we're in JavaScript world. So make dir muse app front end, Angular front end, whatever you want to call it. You'll want to do an npm install. Npm init -y, npm install --save express. Just make a really simple Express app that is serving up an Angular front end, just like we did with Project 3. But let me share my screen really quickly, and maybe visually this will help. Let me separate this out a little bit, because this is it's a little tricky for sure, but you guys will get the hang of it. So let me pull my other app over here. 1 second here. Okay. And again, we're going to come back in like 30 minutes, and I'm going to walk through from scratch how to do this, but I don't want to just give it to you. I want you guys to get some practice here, because I've been yapping away for 2 days, and you guys need to work on this yourself. Let me open this up. And cool. So let me share my screen and just give you, maybe visually, maybe this will be a little helpful. Okay, so if you're looking at my screen, I have 2 separate applications, okay? So this one on the left, this is the one that we've been building over the past day and a half. This is my Muse Rails API backend. I have it open up in Atom separately, and here's my Rails server running, completely separate, completely different terminal window. This is on localhost 3000. This is the back end. Over here on the right, this is my front end application. It's an entirely different folder, an entirely different terminal window. And here you can see that this app, just like we've done in projects 2 and 3, is running on localhost port 4000. This is a Node Express Angular app. This is the Rails API that we just got to completion. If you look at the folder structure of this application, this should be, we've been doing this for like 6 weeks. Node modules folder, here's a public folder with all of the front end information. Here's an app.js to instantiate Angular. You're going to inject your UI router, inject $HTTP here in the Muse controller. So, we just got finished doing this with project 3. And again, I put some pseudocode into Slack, but all of these $HTTP calls, they're just going to the localhost 3000. All it's doing is it's going to go right over here to the Rails API app, and it's going to grab all of that data. And I can even show you that. Let me bring up the application and drag it back down here. So right here, again, so this is the Node Angular Express application. Watch what happens over here in my Rails API when I try to click on something. So if I want to see Taylor Swift's specifics, I click on that. Let me restart that. And we should see all of the information happen over here. So if I go to artists, let me restart this. So see how when I go to the artist page, again, on localhost 4000, this is my Angular app. See how I pinged my Rails API to get that data. So I'm pinging localhost 3000 /artists, and then Rails API goes into my database, grabs all the artists, and returns it as a JSON object here. So it's pretty much the same thing we did for project 3, only instead of hitting our Mongoose Mongo database, we're just going to hit this Rails API. So they're completely decoupled, they're completely separate. Here, I'll give you the first. Kind of method here. So this is the first function, the prompt that I asked you guys. So just create a get artist function. It's a $HTTP get, and it's hitting the localhost 3000 /artist endpoint. And again, that's the same endpoint that we're playing around with in Postman. So whether I do it here in Angular, or if I go back to Postman here, it's the same thing, just a get request to /artists. And this is the data that I'm receiving. And Angular is just, putting it into the page. So that's the idea. And for sure, there's some moving parts here, and that's why we're getting practice with it. But just want to give you guys like 30 minutes to hack on this, and then we'll come back and start building it together, then put you guys back into breakouts and such. So just give it the old college try, and we'll get through it. Any other questions before we break? So we'll come back at like 4 o'clock and answer any questions, and I'll start building this from scratch. And so we'll talk about it as we get through it. To answer Audrey's question, no need to do a Mongoose Connect because we are using the backend for data. That is absolutely perfect. We're building a Node Express Angular app without any Mongo because Rails API is doing all of our database stuff.
The one thing I do understand is Angular, so I'm okay.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, folks. Enough yapping from me. I'll see you guys at 4 o'clock.